Hi, my name's Ameet Chana and I am a actor here in the UK for the past, I don't know, 26, 27 years, something like that. I was born in Epsom in Surrey, and then my dad had this kind of itchy feet syndrome. So every 4 or 5 years, he'd buy a new sort of off license or business, build it up, and then kind of get really bored and then move again. So I lived in, like, say, Croydon 3 times, in and out, having left to come back. I lived in Reading for about 4 or 5 years, and then we moved to Harrow when I was about 13, 14. And then, yeah, been based in and around Harrow for the last 20 odd years, yeah. So Southall, I mean, particularly for me, it was amazing because even if we lived far away in Croydon, it would be something that we went to almost every Sunday. Because firstly, late 70s, early 80s was very difficult to have local Indian shops or at least source a lot of the ingredients and things that my parents would want or our families would want to have. So Southall was a regular haunt for us. And because we owned off licenses as well, it was always a weird one because Sunday was the only time that we'd have. So the shop would be closed between 2 and 7 every Sunday. So literally at 2 o'clock, we'd jump in a car, drive down, do the shopping, get some food. That was always the biggest treat. And then try and get back for 7 o'clock, even if we lived in Reading or Croydon, wherever we were at the time. Southall, for those that don't know, is just I think it was dubbed Little Panjab really early on, you know, and it literally is that. I mean, it's changing a lot now, but certainly when we were growing up, my parents really loved going there, not just because you could get stuff, but they felt at home, they had family you could drop into, you'd always bump into someone on Southall Broadway. And as a child, I think the thing I remembered the most was just the colours and the vibrancy. Only having visited India twice when I was young, it really did remind me of that, you know, kind of home from home, even though it was only like 15 miles down the road. But yeah, just the most amazing kind of colourful and vibrant high street, you know, and I just remember good food, to be honest, and mum doing sari shopping. No, I never really felt embarrassed about going to Southall. It's kind of weird because it's not something I ever spoke about. And luckily, when I was growing up, there was still a lot of young Asian kind of kids in my class and school and stuff, so it wasn't really something to hide. I felt, I don't know, it was weird. Maybe I just had a strong connect with it from the beginning. I do remember lying about summer holidays. The twice that I went to India as a kid, I'd come back after school and people were like, "Where'd you go?" And I go, "Nowhere," even though I spent 6 weeks in India in the Punjab. Do you know what I mean? And everybody would be like, "Oh, we went to the Canary Islands or this and that, whatever." I'd just be like, "No, we didn't go anywhere. We didn't go anywhere." So in terms of cinemas in Southall, I don't have any connection with that, but I do still to this day, and even then as a child, remember my dad and saying to me, we used to come here on a Sunday, we get a bus all the way from Croydon. I think it was like 4 buses they had to change to go to the Dominion Centre or the place next door there to watch kind of Indian films, and it was one of only 2 or 3 places you could watch, you know, Indian cinema. And still to this day, if we go past it, he'll be like, "Oh, we used to watch films here." You know, not that my dad speaks like that. I don't know why I did that. Yeah, but the big thing for me in Southall was music. I was a huge Bhangra fan, huge because of the kind of music that my parents were listening to, and then which was old school Hindi film stuff. But then somewhere like in the early 80s, there was a huge transition into kind of the UK Bhangra sound. So I was always excited to go to Southall to buy tapes. You know, we'd get 5 tapes for a tenner or whatever it was in those days, and there's stalls outside and used to pick and choose and ask to listen to the first track on the album, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then became a huge fan of Bhangra music from there. So that was my kind of entertainment connection to Southall. It's really strange, the connection between being really culturally rooted musically, and then kind of love for cinema was because I remember my dad bought our first VHS player when I was probably must have been about 6 or 7. And I remember you had to pay £10, even in those days, to rent a video because people never knew whether they were going to get it back or not. So if you gave, as well as a £50 deposit, and that was back then, you'd pay a £50 membership fee because people would be like, people keep stealing our videos. And piracy wasn't really that huge a thing yet either. So in order to guarantee it, they'd take £50 deposit plus £10 to rent it for the whole weekend. And I remember watching films like Ram Balram and Karz, and just Qurbani, amazing films that came out in the early 80s, as well as having my cousins influence me to watch things like Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive. And one of my cousins, Raju, he was well into Sylvester Stallone. He was a big kind of idol for him, so we would always watch the Rocky films. And even I was watching things like First Blood well before I was supposed to, you know, age-wise. So yeah, my love for cinema came from that. It was the fusion of what my cousins were showing me and then what we were sitting down as a family together watching, really late night on a Saturday night, because my parents would shut the shop at 10 o'clock and we were allowed to stay up to sit and watch this 3-hour film afterwards. I probably fell asleep through most of them because they were so long. But yeah, that's where my love for cinema came from, really early on. Yeah, so I guess my journey into cinema from that was pretty much something that my parents, I think, saw before me, actually, funny enough. I was a huge Michael Jackson fan. My dad loved Elvis Presley, so it was always on in our house. Amitabh Bachchan was a huge influence to all of our family, We didn't really have British or American kind of Asian idols or heroes to look up to. So people like Sylvester Stallone, John Travolta, they looked a little bit brown. So, they were the closest things we had to kind of be inspired by. So I used to emulate Michael Jackson and Elvis Presley and people like that. And I think my parents saw some sort of performer in me well before. I was always involved in school productions. And then when we moved to Harrow, I remember I was about 13 and my mum said that there was this Sunday workshop school called the London Academy of Acting that was run by Mr. Gurdial Sira and his son Puneet Sira. And I was enrolled into that as a 13, 14-year-old kid of like 12, 13 week kind of crash course of workshopping as an actor. So they did theatre, they did film, they did TV, different styles of acting, they did improvisation, things like that. And then it's only then, at that sort of 13, 14, that I realised that there was a possibility. Other Asian actors who had started working, people like Ronnie Jutti and Archie Panjabi, Veena Tulsiani, who was in Grange Hill at that time, they would come in and say hello to us in a class, and they were pre-students of that school prior to that Sunday school kind of thing. And I started to kind of realise and go, wow, there's a possibility of this happening, And then I completed that course, and then that school had its own agency called TIC, which is Talent Introduction Centre, which was run by Puneet Sira. And they sort of signed me up and started sending me to auditions. And to be honest, I still remember getting my first phone call from my agent saying, oh, we've got this corporate video you've got to shoot in Bristol. I was only 15 at the time, I was still at school, so I had to have a chaperone and a driver and all that kind of stuff. And I was picked up from school, and I remember my agent saying, oh, look, it's only 150 quid, it's the day's work. And I was like, you can keep the 150 quid, where do I go? Tell me where to go, where do I sign? And I remember getting picked up really early on with a driver, and then I had a tutor with me as well, and went on set to these studios in Bristol somewhere. And at that time, the London Docklands was just an idea, it was in development. And there was a company called the London Docklands Development Corporation, and they were making corporate videos about education for people that were being displaced out of that area, and how to find new schools and get your kids involved in further education and things like that. It was quite a clever ploy, I think. So that was my first proper acting gig, this corporate video about further education once you leave school. And that was it. That's when and then suddenly, slowly, somewhere from being a 15-year-old that didn't care how much I was getting for the day to being sort of 21, 22, 23, and then realizing this is what I'm going to do as a job, and I wanted to know how much I was going to get paid first before I started doing anything else. But yeah, I guess that was my transition into it all. Being involved in things like Bend It Like Beckham was a huge, huge deal. Not because of what it went on to do, but commercially what it went on to do, but what it went on to do in terms of putting British Asian actors on the map. East is East had done the same thing. There'd been a couple of other films that weren't maybe hugely successful, obviously Bargee on the Beach, things like that. But slowly, slowly there was an insurgence of great British Asian actors that were in films being released in cinemas, directed by a British Asian director, or written by Ayub Khan Din, or there was a whole insurgence of directors, actors, writers, all starting to kind of get represented and fly the flag. And I think Bend It Like Beckham was definitely one of those films that not only appealed to the Asian audience, but everybody and anybody I still meet to this day, 15 years later, has seen Bend It Like Beckham, pretty much. It's very rarely that I'll meet someone, and even if they have to be reminded by someone, or I've seen you somewhere before, and then they click, but they've seen it, and probably more than once. It's one of those films that will cross generations as well. Young kids still come up to me that wouldn't have even been born when the film came out 15 years ago, saying that they've seen it. So it was great, and not, like I said, not just because commercially, but everybody and everybody went to see that film or has seen that film, and from all communities and all cultures and all backgrounds. It was dubbed in like 10 different languages. It was in German and Spanish and Hindi and Panjabi and English, and it was just an amazing achievement, that film. I think Bend It Like Beckham's big, apart from the title, obviously, but its biggest success was the universality of it. It wasn't just about a girl that wanted to play football. It was about anybody and everybody that had dreamed to do something, but kept meeting blocks in their life. You know, whatever that is. If that means you want to play football, if you want to become an actor, even if it means that, it's that kind of Billy Elliot syndrome. It's that thing of like, you don't belong here, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it. And I think that's what everyone connected to. You know, it wasn't just about an Indian girl that wanted to play football. It was everyone watching has had an aspiration or a dream to do something, and kind of went, yeah, I wonder if I just pushed on, maybe I had, or gone, that's me, I did that. I fought against any kind of system or parents or blocks or teachers or whatever it was, and I got to where I wanted to get to. And I think that was its huge kind of universality. But also, I think what that film did was, and it did so beautifully, is that it told the non-Asian audience that we were the same as you. We have the same dreams, we have the same aspirations, we have the same journeys, we have the same issues, we have the same lies, we have the same truths, we have, and it made, I think, the assimilation of our community much better than it has been prior to that point. You still get weird, like I remember Jonathan Ross's review was like, after I'd seen the film, I wanted to hug the first Sikh I could find. Those are weird comments, but those are comments that still brought people together, and there was a lot of that. I still remember to this day, one of my things that really sticks in my mind. When the film was coming out, there were pre-release reviews of this British Asian comedy and blah, 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 and it was tagged straight away before the audiences even got to see it. And after it came out, because it did so well, it became probably one of the best British films ever. The Asian got dropped, the tag got dropped because it was accepted. It was allowed in, because it was a huge success. Had it not been, it would have remained a British Asian film, and I think it transcended so many things, that film. I think cinema being a safe space has been the case for years, no matter who you are. Cinema is, particularly cinema that comes from the South Asian kind of continent, part of the continent, is particularly Indian cinema, is escapist. I mean, that's the whole reason why it had the success that it's had over the years in the 80s and 90s. Now India is making much more challenging films, and not necessarily, see, for me, Bollywood is a genre within the Indian film industry. It's not the Indian film industry now, but certainly since the westernized tag, if you look back, Indian cinema or Bollywood was a way and means of people that were labor forces or drivers, taxi drivers, rickshaw drivers, for them to save that little bit of money and 100, 150 rupees and go and watch it in a single screen cinema with no air conditioning, but escape the reality for 3 hours, And I think cinema's always been escapist, whether it's as heightened as Bollywood or Indian cinema, or whether it's connecting through comedy and in things like Beckham or the Full Monty or whatever you want to, cinemas have always been safe places. And I think one of the greatest thing about cinema is it allows people a voice where they may not have it elsewhere. Whether it's about cultural or clashes of communities or your sexuality or a choice of career or anything like that. Cinema has always been a safe place and a safe haven for people to be able to express themselves. And long may it continue, and I think that was another reason why our parents in the 70s used to make that 4-bus journey to go all the way from Croydon to Southall to watch a film for 3 hours, because A, it connected them to the country that they left behind. B, they felt represented by these kind of stars that were telling, some of them were social movies as well. They weren't just kind of escapist Bollywood films, telling stories that they wanted to tell. And C, it was like, well, we can go there and be who we want in that cinema for 3 hours and not worry about any of the aggression or the racism or whatever that they were experiencing outside as well. So yeah, cinema's always been a safe place, and it should always continue to be. The way that cinema can help forward kind of assimilation into communities, or like you said, cultural diversity, or even immigrant stories or whatever, is perfectly proven in, I think, what you guys are trying to do here also. I think bringing together communities of young kids from a young age to slightly older, to kind of your age group or whatever, but people are from all different backgrounds. And I think telling a story doesn't just have to come from one person's point of view. I think our schools and our generations are interconnecting much better than they ever did now. I think certainly because of things like social media and classrooms and activities and ventures for kids to have, like today, the kids I met outside earlier, you know, they were all from different backgrounds. And one girl was hugely, kind of amazingly dressed up in Indian outfits and stuff, and another kid was wearing a tracksuit. And it's about self-expression. And I think the way forward is to collectively tell these stories. It doesn't just have to be a story of an Indian immigrant in a film. It can be a story of 5 immigrants from different places in one film, because everybody gets represented, and actually you'll find that everyone's got almost a similar story to tell, but the journey is different. And that's why I think we can move forward. I think if we all come together and start making films, I think if I go back to talking about British Asian cinema, which is where we started, I think the problem with that is there's only so many times we can see a huge Panjabi wedding on screen, or there's only so many times we can tell a story of a girl running away, or there's only so many times we can tell the story of partition, or leaving home and moving to another country. I think now the important thing is to tell the stories of our experiences here, you know, the 2nd and 3rd generation and the 4th generation now of immigrants, be it Asian or Polish or whatever it is, and tell those stories of our experiences rather than trying to tell stories from way back when or glamorize stuff so much as well. So many stories that we've got to tell. And I think those are the stories that need to be told now. And I think they will then become universal to cinema goers, no matter what your background is. It's funny you talk about heritage, actually, because I just recently, randomly, just completely coincidentally, I've started to spend far more, in fact, this evening I'm going out with my dad as well, and I've just started to spend far more time with my dad as a one-on-one than I have done in years, and probably didn't get a chance to as a kid because, you know, our parents were always working. I was looked after by my older sister, and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I found out stuff the other day that his dad had brothers and sisters that I had no idea about, because I'd never met them, I'd never seen them. They were in Punjab and they all passed away, and that was that. And then he told me about his mum's brother and sisters and stuff, and I was kind of like, okay, so what happened to him and what happened to... And it's amazing, you know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. The stories don't change. It's the generations that change. And through those generations, the journey that changes. But the stories are similar, right? It's about, oh, they tried to do this and it didn't happen because so-and-so tried to stop them. And, you know, that 3-act play or whatever it is the same for everyone. It's just how you tell that story, or whatever that journey was for that story is different. And but going back to your question, the importance of heritage is everything, because if we don't have heritage, then what stories have we got to tell? You know, our experiences are everything. You know, and I think some of the best films that have ever been made have been either autobiographical or from the writer or director's experiences, or an idea that they've heard from someone, or from a book that someone's written about their own journey or experiences. And I think heritage is everything, and the most important thing about heritage is for it to be documented. I heard something recently that it said the only thing new in this life is the history that you don't know yet. We know everything else. It's only the untold parts of history that haven't been told or haven't made it to your kind of periphery vision yet is the only new thing in the world. You know, otherwise everything else is known. Told history is known and current life is known, but only history that you don't know about is new. And I think that's amazing, and that kind of sums up heritage for me. I think there's so many stories that can be told still, you know, almost contradictory to what I just said, but those stories can be kind of brought up to date in a I'm not going to tell people how to tell stories, but I think documenting heritage is everything, because otherwise from there nobody will know where we come from when we start to tell our stories. I think it's really important for institutes like the BFI and anything else like it to have platforms like this. It's really important because, again, it goes back to the powers that be, or the people that have the ability to give these opportunities. And I think, and it's great that we'll have 1 month in a year, but actually eventually what it should be is just part of the process. You know, it's great that the month of August is dedicated to kind of, you know, documenting South Indian cinema, particularly from Southall, and then obviously all this great memorabilia of kind of Hindi cinema from way back when and all that kind of stuff. But I think if it's not done like this now, then how is it going to develop? And I think everything starts from a gem of an idea, you know, a germ of an idea, and that's what it progresses to. And I think if young kids now at this age, the ones I just met earlier, 10 to 15-year-olds, appreciate this, then they'll appreciate everything else that comes their way. But they can't appreciate it unless it exists. Otherwise, they're always fighting the fight. Oh, it's not going to happen. No one's going to give me the chance. You know, oh, they don't want to hear this story. You know, the opportunity where young kids are being told, you know, you can come and write these films. We've got sets for you to shoot in, and then we'll show them on our big screen inside after you've edited them and put sound on them and graded them and, you know, and put it all together, and it will be screened on that huge screen inside the BFI, which is an amazing screen, you know. And for kids to kind of go, you know what, the world isn't against me, they're on my side. Or the industry isn't against me, they're on my side, they're giving us this opportunity. Then I think positivity leads to everything, you know. They kind of go, well, you know, I was given that chance now I need to make something of it. Now I can't just stand here and go, no one's given me the chance, you know. And I think that needs to come from various other institutes and buildings like this. I think the greatest thing about giving young people the opportunity to express them creatively is that they have no filter. They haven't been given guidelines. They haven't said this is not possible. They haven't been told you can't do this and you can't do that, other than probably whatever it is within the age group of, like, I don't know, swearing or copulation or, you know, at that age group, whatever it is. But the greatest thing is you get such honesty from young people. And honesty in the sense that now we're talking about classes and groups of young kids that are much more integrated than we ever were, culturally, aware of each other's kind of processes. My daughter's not even 6 yet, and she talks about her Polish friends. They have this event and they do this, and she speaks a little bit of Polish. Her friends speak a bit of Hindi and Panjabi. You know, we never had that. We always had that non-Asian kid that wanted to kind of roll, or we taught bad words to, and vice versa. But these are whole classrooms, or whole groups of kids that are starting to understand and respect each other. If you give them the powerful weapon that I call a camera and a microphone, God knows what they're going to be able to create and bring together and change, you know, people's perceptions, outlooks, and just, you know, we'll start small, but eventually start to even begin to change the world's opinion on things that we've been trying to do for years. Southall holds great memories for me. I've shot a couple of films around Southall. My first film I ever did was called Wild West, which was about an Asian country and western band set from Southall that didn't want to do Bhangra. They wanted to sing country and western music, and that was based on a real band who didn't do country western. They did much more guitar-based stuff, but the film that was written by Harwant Baines kind of had to be a bit softened down for that. And it was a comedy, but it was just about these, you know, these three Muslim brothers and a Sikh guy, their best friend, who wanted to go to Nashville and make country music, you know. And I still remember some of the scenes that we shot in Southall. I remember being, I think it was either a Saturday or a Sunday morning on Southall Broadway. And when I say on Southall Broadway, I mean actually in the middle of Southall Broadway. 4 of us walking through the traffic. They hadn't stopped the traffic because we didn't have permission to be there, I don't think. This was a film for film as well. With a Rottweiler next to us, because that was our pet dog. And I had raw meat in my hand in order for the Rottweiler to stay next to me. He had to keep sniffing the raw meat and licking my hand to try, because he kept wandering off into the traffic. And we had this shot of us walking through the weekend traffic of Southall Broadway, which was a memory I'll never forget. I remember exploding a police car around the back of the old Sunrise Radio building, around that kind of Havelock Road area, in just a wasteland, which I think is flats now. Of exploding, and we cut the roof off of a police car and then blew it up. And actually, something I was talking about just 2 days ago, so the really famous Shahi Naan Kebab that was on the Southall Bridge station, for years and years, it's gone now unfortunately, but for years and years, after we shot that film Wild West, because we were facing it, going up the hill, up the bridge, there was just a brick wall. So they put MDF cutouts of huge letters and called it Kebab Shack. And that stayed there, that sign stayed there for probably over 20 years. They never took it down. So some people called it Kebab Shack, and the people that knew before that called it Shahi Naan Kebab. And I think it's only after, I think recently, not so long ago, they took it down. And every time, and I shot that film when I was 14, 15, I think. It was nearly 30 years ago. And I remember every time I went past or drove past that memory of the film came back just looking at those letters, Kebab Shack. But shot short films on Southall Broadway of bank robberies. I've shot inside restaurants and jalebis and curries for the whole day. So we, just going back to that, my friend Ronnie Jutti, who I mentioned right at the beginning, directed a short film. And the end of the film climaxes on Southall Broadway of a bank robbery that goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, the actor that was in it gets tripped up and the bag of money goes up in the air, and obviously slow motion, you know, all that kind of stuff. And no word of a lie, everyone on Southall Broadway that happened to be going past tried to grab the money. It wasn't real money, but they just thought that somebody had really robbed the bank, got tripped up, and this money went up in the air, and they all started to grab the money. And we've got that all on camera as well, which is great, because it really worked for the scene. Until obviously take 3, then people started to realize this was a bit weird, and it was all paper. But the cultural thing is amazing, because as we know, Asians and films go back together so much, and obviously stars in India particularly are like gods, you know. So just that cultural thing of kind of hoarding and coming together and trying to see who's in there, as it happens anywhere. But we have a very different approach, you know. It's like quite aggro-based kind of thing of people trying to push forward and all that. But people are so good. When you film on Southall Broadway, people, particularly shop owners, they're always really welcome. And they're like, come in, have something, you know, or what are you filming? You know, and all that kind of stuff. And always very welcoming. And it's interesting because Southall's going through such a big change at the moment. You know, it's going to be on the Crossrail. There's flats being built everywhere. The Union Canal is no longer open to just, you know, it's been blocked by all these glass buildings that are being built. And I feel like in the next 5 years, culturally, it's going to change immensely. And it might be for the better. It might become a much more integrated thing. But that heritage, as we've been talking about, and that history will slowly start to kind of, you know, be much more diversely cultural, I think, which will be beneficial for Southall, I think. But just, I think if we ever lose that kind of desiness of Southall Broadway, it would be a real shame. I think the future of cinema, I went to the cinema yesterday to watch the new Shah Rukh Khan film, which was a huge mistake. But it's really interesting because when you buy a ticket now, they've got this point system. I bought 3 tickets, me, my wife and my daughter, and they gave me 3 vouchers back to buy 2 tickets for £12, so £6 tickets each and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of that going on. And I think cinemas are trying their very, very best to try and bring people back into the cinema, because it is and will be a dying experience, because we are streaming everything off of Netflix, and you know, Netflix are producing their own films now. Brad Pitt's last film only went to Netflix, you know. And I think it'd be a real shame if we ever lose cinema completely. And I think streaming is great. I think everybody benefits from it, including the productions and the actors and so on and so forth, and the people paying a monthly subscription at home. But then cinema tickets really got extortionate, you know, and you know, just for a small family like mine to go out to the cinema is £50. You know, you're talking about £10–12 a ticket plus the popcorn, plus you've got a kid, so she'll want this and want that and whatever, and you know, you can restrict those, but you're still talking about £30–40 to go and see a 2-hour film. So it makes the streaming stuff makes sense financially, but I think the experience will never be the same. You know, going to the cinema and listening to that Pearl and Dean music at the beginning, you know, is always one thing that I really, or the 20th century Fox drums, or all that kind of stuff in that kind of sound quality and that environment. If that ever wipes out, I think it would be a real shame.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Cheers.